They raised their glasses right outside the delivery room, as if a life snuffing out was just an incidental cost. I was ready to scream until a doctor leaned close to my ear and whispered one sentence that changed the colour of the entire picture. From that moment on, I stopped being a mother in mourning. I became a woman who knew exactly which thread to pull to make the whole heavy curtain fall. My name is Lorraine Whitaker. I am 56 years old. I deal in numbers. As a payroll accountant for Harbourvale Freight Systems, I know that every action has a cost and every ledger must eventually balance. I live a quiet life in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, a life built on routine and the manageable silence of widowhood. That silence broke at 4:17 in the morning. The phone rang with the shrill insistence of bad news. It was the hospital in Riverton, Pennsylvania. Maya, my daughter, 28 years old and supposed to be weeks away from her due date. The voice on the other end was clipped and professional. Complications, rapid decline, emergency C-section. I did not ask questions. I just grabbed my keys. I drove north on the interstate with my foot heavy on the gas. The speedometer read 80, then 90. The road was a blur of grey asphalt and black trees. My mind replayed the last few months like a corrupted video file. Maya had changed. She used to call me every day to complain about her swollen ankles or the heartburn. Recently, she had gone quiet. When I asked about the birth plan or the nursery, she deflected. The in-laws are handling it. Mum, don't worry, she had said during our last call, her voice sounding thin and strained. Ethan says, well, he says they know best. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The hospital waiting area in Riverton felt wrong the moment I stepped off the elevator. It did not smell like anxiety. It smelled like expensive cologne. The Caldwells were there. Ethan's parents, Dale and Corinne. They were not wearing sweatpants or hastily thrown-on coats. They were dressed in pressed slacks and cashmere sweaters. They looked like they were waiting for a table at a high-end brunch, not a life-or-death surgery. They were smiling. They were chatting. They looked ready to receive a prize. I saw the gurney rushing down the hall. I ran. I caught one glimpse of my daughter before the double doors swallowed her. She looked small. Her skin was the colour of old paper. Her lips were white. Her eyes found mine for a fraction of a second. There was no recognition in them, only terror. Then the doors swung shut. I stood there for what felt like hours. It was probably only 20 minutes. Then I heard it. The thin, angry cry of a newborn. A wave of relief hit me so hard I almost fell against the wall. But then the doors opened again. A nurse walked out. She did not look at me. She looked at the floor. She looked at the wall. She walked straight to me and took my arm with a grip that was too tight. "Ms. Whitaker?" she asked. I nodded. She took a breath that shuddered in her chest. "We did everything we could. We are so sorry. She didn't make it." My knees hit the linoleum. The sound was a dull thud. The world tilted sideways. I could not breathe. I could not think. I was drowning in the sterile air. Then a sound cut through the ringing in my ears. Pop. It was crisp and festive. The sound of a cork leaving a bottle. I looked up, down the hall, near the entrance to the recovery suite. The Caldwells were standing in a circle. Dale was holding a bottle of champagne. He was pouring it into plastic flutes they had brought themselves. They were toasting. I scrambled to my feet. I ran toward them. My legs felt heavy. I stopped 10 feet away. Corinne was holding her glass up to the light. She looked at her husband. It is a tragedy. Of course, she said, her voice smooth and unbothered. But at least the baby is fine. Maya signed the papers. The world stopped spinning. It froze. Signed the papers. The words hung in the air like smoke. My Maya was terrified of forms. She panic attacked over tax returns. She made me read every line of her lease agreements 3 times before she would even pick up a pen. She never signed anything without me. Never. What papers? I asked. My voice sounded jagged, like glass grinding against stone. I stepped forward, ignoring the way my knees threatened to buckle. Maya never signed anything without reading it twice. What papers did she sign? Dale lowered his champagne flute slowly. He looked at me with the pitying expression one might offer a confused child or a senile relative. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and patronizing. "Lorraine, please," he said, his voice low and practiced. "These are complex adult matters. You are emotional right now. You are not thinking clearly." "I am thinking perfectly clearly," I snapped, shrugging his hand off. "My daughter is dead. You are drinking alcohol outside her room. I want to know what she signed." Corinne sighed, a sound of elegant exasperation. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy, grainy and smeared with toner marks. She held it out, but did not let go of the corner when I grabbed it. "It is just standard procedure. Lorraine," Corinne said. "Consent forms. Power of attorney for medical decisions should she become incapacitated. We just wanted to make sure everything was handled properly for the baby." I looked at the document. The text was blurry, but the signature at the bottom stopped my heart. It read, "Maya Whitaker." But the letters were wrong. The M was too wide. The A trailed off into a jagged line. It looked like the handwriting of someone who was falling off a cliff. This isn't her signature," I whispered. She was shaking. Why was she shaking? She was in pain. "Lorraine," Dale said dismissively. "Where is Ethan?" I looked around. He should be here. Why isn't he here? "Ethan is handling the administrative side of things for his son," Corinne said, smoothing the front of her silk blouse. "He is devastated, obviously. He is filling out forms in the business office." I turned and walked to the nurse's station. "I need to see my son-in-law. Is Ethan Caldwell in the business office?" The ward clerk looked up, confused. "Mr. Caldwell? No. The business office closed at 5 in the afternoon. I haven't seen him since before the surgery started." My stomach dropped. I spun around, scanning the hallway. A midwife was walking past, carrying a bundle of soiled linens. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes darting toward the Caldwells and then back to me. "You're her mother," she said softly. "Yes," I said. Did she ask for me?" The midwife bit her lip. She lowered her voice to a whisper. 3 times. She kept asking where you were. She wouldn't sign the papers. She kept saying she needed you to read them first. But they told her you were not coming, that you said it wasn't necessary." Before I could scream, a heavy hand landed on my arm. It was a hospital security guard. He was large, imposing, and looking at me with zero sympathy. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice," he said. "We have families here trying to rest. You are causing a disturbance?" "I am causing a disturbance." I pointed a shaking finger at the Caldwells. They are drinking champagne in a hospital hallway. My daughter just died. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell are grieving in their own way, the guard said, his tone final. If you cannot compose yourself, I will have to escort you off the floor. I watched, helpless, as Dale and Corinne offered the guard a sad, apologetic smile. They were the victims here. I was the hysterical woman. I retreated to the observation window of the nursery. Inside, a nurse was holding my grandson. He was tiny, pink, and screaming. Dale and Corinne stood on the other side of the glass. Dale had a professional-grade camera. He was leaning in, adjusting the lens. Flash. A burst of white light illuminated the infant's screwed-up face. Flash. Corinne cooed, pointing at the baby's nose. They were framing the shot. They were checking the lighting. Not a single tear marred their perfect faces. They were not looking at a child who had just lost his mother. They were looking at an acquisition. I went back to the nurse's station. I want to speak to the attending physician. Now. Dr. Evans is busy, the clerk said without looking up. He is in a debriefing. We will have him call you. I will wait, I said. I waited for hours. The hallway emptied out. The Caldwells eventually left, taking their camera and their silence with them, telling the staff they needed to rest for the baby's sake. A young doctor walked past the waiting area. He looked tired. He paused for a second when he saw me. His eyes were wide, fearful. He looked like he wanted to say something. His mouth opened slightly, but then he glanced at the security camera mounted on the ceiling. He shut his mouth, turned his head, and walked away rapidly, his footsteps echoing on the tile. Night fell heavy and suffocating. I sat alone on a hard plastic chair in the corner of the waiting room. The lights dimmed to a low hum. My hands smelled like harsh antiseptic soap. I looked at the dark windows, realizing the silence around me was not empty. It was constructed. I was being steered. They were building a wall around the truth, brick by brick. And I was sitting on the outside. 2 years ago, Maya had brought Ethan home to my small kitchen in Pittsburgh, her eyes shining brighter than the cheap fluorescent light overhead. She had sat across from me, gripping a mug of cocoa like it was a holy relic, and whispered the words that now tasted like ash in my mouth. He is different. Mum. He listens to me. He is not arrogant like the other rich guys we meet at mixers. He really sees me. I remembered how Ethan had sat on my worn-out sofa, his posture perfect, his smile practiced but convincing. He had charmed me. He had pulled out my chair. He had asked about my job at Harborvale Freight Systems with an intensity that felt like respect. I had been a fool. I had handed my daughter over to him like I was making a safe deposit. After the wedding, the temperature of our lives dropped by degrees. Maya moved to Riverton to be closer to the Caldwell estate. It started small. She stopped taking freelance design contracts. She was a brilliant graphic designer. But suddenly, her portfolio gathered dust. Ethan thinks, well, he thinks it is safer if I just rest. She had told me over the phone, her voice sounding hollow. He says the stress is bad for future plans. I sat in the dim hospital waiting room, the antiseptic smell burning my nostrils, and scrolled back through my text history. My thumb trembled. I found it. A message from 4 months ago, sent at 2:14 in the morning. Mom, if anything happens, keep the black USB in the drawer. I stared at the screen. I remembered calling her the next morning, frantic. She had texted back hours later. I am fine. Sorry. I was just tired. Ignore that. I had ignored it. I had let the distance and the politeness of the Caldwells lull me into a stupor. I switched apps and found the contact for Tessa Monroe, Maya's best friend from college. I typed a quick message. Did Maya say anything to you about being watched? The 3 dots of the typing indicator appeared instantly, then vanished, then appeared again. Tessa's reply was a block of text that made my stomach turn. She was terrified. Lorraine. She started turning off her location services whenever we talked. She said she felt like there were eyes on her even inside her own house. I closed my eyes. Fragments of the last year swirled around me like debris in a storm. I opened my photo gallery. Maya used to send me pictures of everything: her garden, her dinner, the baby clothes she bought in secret. I scrolled past the happy facades until I found a photo she had sent by mistake and then immediately deleted from the chat. I had saved it before she could unsend it. It was a blurry close-up of a bill. I zoomed in until the pixels sharpened. The header read, Everwell Women's Pavilion. It was a private clinic I had never heard of. The line item was vague special consultation. There was no medical code, no description. Just a fee of $5,000? Why would a healthy young woman need a $5,000 consultation she couldn't tell her mother about Maya's voice? A ghost in my memory. Whispered a sentence she had said during our last lunch, her eyes darting around the restaurant. His family cares about reputation more than me. Mom. Sometimes I feel like I'm just a vessel. I looked up from my phone. The hospital corridor was empty and long, stretching out like the throat of a beast. I realized then that I was not just standing in a tragedy. I was standing inside a system. The Caldwells did not just have money, they had architecture. They had layers of protection built from influence, handshakes, and signed documents. My grief threatened to rise up, a tidal wave of screaming agony. I wanted to throw the chair through the window. I wanted to tear my hair out. But I looked at the reflection of the fluorescent lights on the polished floor. If I collapsed now, they would sweep me away. They would call me hysterical. They would medicate me and send me home. And Maya would become just another sad story. I swallowed the scream. I pushed the tears back until my throat burned. I would not cry in front of them. If I was going to break, I would do it when the door was locked and the lights were out. Before them, I would be iron. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small, spiral-bound notebook I used for tracking grocery expenses. I clicked my pen. The sound was loud in the silence. I turned to a fresh page. 4:17 in the morning. Call received. 5:30 arrival. 6:10. Death pronounced. 6:15 champagne cork. Quote, Maya signed the papers. Dr. Evans unavailable. I wrote it all down. My handwriting was sharp and jagged. I was an accountant. I knew how to find the missing penny in $1 million ledger. They thought they had buried the truth. But they had left a paper trail. Everyone always leaves a paper trail. And I was going to audit them until they bled. The next morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, I did not go to the waiting room to cry. I went to the hospital administration desk. I placed a typed letter on the high counter. It was a formal request to interview the attending physician and a demand for the preservation of all logs related to Maya's surgery. I need you to date stamp this, I told the receptionist, my voice steady. And I need a photocopy of the stamped version for my records. The receptionist looked at me with tired eyes. Ma'am, you can just leave it here. No, I said. I need proof of receipt. Stamp it. Please. She stamped it. The sound of the ink hitting the paper felt like the first shot fired in a war. As I turned away, the atmosphere shifted. The Caldwells approached me near the elevators. Gone were the champagne flutes and the cold shoulders. Corinne reached out and touched my arm with a softness that made my skin crawl. She looked exhausted, artfully so. "Lorraine," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Dale and I have been talking. We want to handle the funeral arrangements. Everything. You shouldn't have to worry about money at a time like this. Let us take care of it so Maya can rest. We should focus on the baby now." "We just want peace," Dale added, nodding solemnly. "Making a scene, asking too many questions. It won't bring her back. It only dishonors her memory." I looked at them. They were trying to buy my silence with a casket. "I will think about it," I lied. I walked straight to the medical records department in the basement. I filled out the request form for a full abstract of Maya's chart. The clerk typed into her computer, frowned, and then looked up at me through thick glasses. "I cannot release these to you, Ms. Whitaker," she said. "I am her mother." I said. "I see that," she replied. "But the legal representative has already requested and received the full file. According to our system, only one copy is released to the primary proxy to protect patient privacy." I gripped the counter. "Who is the legal representative, Ethan?" "I cannot disclose that," she said. "But the file was picked up at 6:30 this morning." I walked out into the corridor. Ethan had not been seen by anyone since yesterday afternoon. How could he pick up files at 6:30 in the morning? I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the bank where Maya and I had opened a joint savings account years ago. She used it for her freelance income. I knew the security questions. "I need to check the status of the account," I told the representative. There was a pause on the line. "Well, Ms. Whitaker, the account is currently flagged. We received a request to change the primary beneficiary from you to an Ethan Caldwell about a week ago." My blood ran cold. "A week ago?" "Yes," the banker said. "But the signature verification didn't match the file perfectly, so we put a hold on it pending in-person confirmation. We haven't been able to reach your daughter." "Cancel it," I said, my voice shaking. "Freeze the account. Do not release a cent." As I hung up, a message popped up from Tessa. It was a screenshot of a text conversation she had with Maya 3 weeks ago. "Maya, if anything happens to me, promise me something." "Tessa, what you're scaring me." "Maya, don't let them have the baby. Not alone. Please." I stared at the screen. It was not a fear of abuse. It was a fear of possession. Maya knew she was just an incubator to them. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Hello." Is this Maya's mom?" a voice whispered on the other end. It was female, young, and trembling. "Yes," I said. "Who is this? I shouldn't be calling," the voice said. "I work on the 3rd floor, but you need to know something is wrong. The times don't match." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Wait, don't hang up." "I can't talk." She gasped. The line went dead. Before I could process the call, a hospital administrator in a grey suit approached me. He held a clipboard. "Ms. Whitaker," he said efficiently. "We just wanted to confirm that the tissue donation team is on their way. Maya's consent form for full tissue donation was processed along with the C-section paperwork." I looked at him. Maya was superstitious about her body. She had told me explicitly when she got her driver's license that she did not want to be a donor. She said it gave her bad vibes. She never agreed to that, I said. We have her signature, the man said smoothly. I looked at the closed doors of the administration wing. I finally understood what was happening. They were not just grieving. They were scrubbing the scene. They were locking down every exit, every file, and every dollar before I could even take a breath. It was a race, and I was already laps behind. The hospital corridor had quieted down, settling into the rhythmic, mechanical hum of the night shift. I stood in the alcove near the vending machines, staring at a row of overpriced granola bars without really seeing them. My reflection in the glass looked ghostly. A woman eroding under the weight of the last 12 hours. I sensed movement beside me. It was the young doctor I had seen earlier, the one who had looked at me with fear in his eyes. He stopped at the machine next to mine, pretending to study the selection of sodas. He did not look at me. His body was rigid, his shoulders drawn up tight toward his ears. "Do not look at me," he said. His voice barely audible over the compressor of the refrigeration unit. "Keep looking at the machine." I froze. "Who are you? I am Dr. Miles Avery," he whispered. "I am a second-year OBGYN resident. I only have 1 minute before my attending notices I am gone. You need to listen to me." He reached into his pocket, fumbling for change that he did not insert into the machine. "Go on," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You need to formally request a forensic audit of the digital signature timestamps and the approval chain for the surgery consents," he said. He spoke fast, the words tumbling out in a nervous rush. Why, I asked. They showed me the paper. Dr. Avery swallowed hard. I saw his Adam's apple bob in his throat. He leaned slightly closer, though he kept his eyes fixed on the reflection in the glass. "Because there is a file that was modified after the fact," he whispered. "And someone signed for her while she was sedated. The air left my lungs. What I saw the medication logs. Mrs. Whitaker," he said, his voice trembling. "I saw the time the sedative was administered, and I saw the time the consent was digitally stamped. They do not match. She was already under. She could not have held a pen. She could not have consented to any of it." "Who signed it?" I hissed, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "I saw the person standing there," he said, evading the direct accusation. "I saw the shadow on the floor. I cannot say more or I will lose my license. But it wasn't her." He slid a folded scrap of paper along the metallic ledge of the vending machine. It was small, torn from a prescription pad. "Take this," he said. "That is the name of the administrative nurse who was logging the surgery, and the case number. Do not let the Caldwells know I spoke to you. Please." I palmed the paper, slipping it into my pocket. "The baby. Is he safe, Dr. Avery finally looked at me, just for a second. His eyes were tired and filled with a profound, heavy guilt. "The baby is stable," he said. "He is healthy. But everything surrounding Maya's death, it isn't clean. None of it is clean." He turned to leave, but paused, his hand gripping the edge of the machine. "One last thing," he said. "Demand an independent autopsy. Do not use the hospital pathologist. Do not use anyone they recommend. They will try to talk you out of it. They will say it is invasive. They will say it is cruel. Do not listen." Then he was gone. his white coat disappearing around the corner like a wisp of smoke. I stood there for a long time. The vending machine rattled and dropped a bottle of water someone else had paid for. I felt a strange sensation spreading through my chest. It was no longer just the heavy, crushing weight of grief. It was heat. It was the feeling of standing in a room filled with gas and realizing someone had just handed me a match. It was a small flame, but in the right conditions. It was enough to blow the entire building apart. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. My tears were drying up, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I walked back toward the waiting area. I saw the Caldwells sitting there, speaking in hushed tones, looking composed and untouchable. For the first time since I arrived, I did not see them as a grieving family. I did not see them as powerful socialites. I looked at them and I saw a balance sheet. I saw a ledger full of fraudulent entries. Every lie was a liability. Every forged signature was a debt. And I was the auditor who was going to make sure they paid every single cent. I did not go home to grieve. I went to the office of Renee Klein. She was a lawyer who specialized in estate disputes and medical liability, known in 3 counties for being as quiet and lethal as a carbon monoxide leak. Her office did not smell like mahogany and old money. It smelled like printer toner and burnt coffee. I liked her immediately. "I need a retainer check for $5,000, Renee said, not looking up from the notes I had handed her. "And I need you to sign this engagement letter. Once you do, I become your shield." I wrote the check. My hand did not shake. "First step," Renee said, sliding a document across the desk. "We send a preservation letter to the hospital and to this Everwell clinic. It puts them on notice that litigation is anticipated. If they delete a single email, scrub a server log, or loop a security camera tape after receiving this, it is spoliation of evidence. It turns a mistake into a crime." The reaction from the Caldwells was immediate. It came in the form of a courier delivering a thick envelope to my temporary hotel room. It was a request to sign a waiver declining an autopsy. Attached was a note from Corinne, written on heavy cream stationery. "Lorraine, darling, let's not cut her up. Let her rest. We can have the funeral on Thursday if you just sign this. We will cover all costs." I called Renee. "Do not sign anything," she ordered. "They are trying to cremate the evidence. If there is no body, there is no toxicology report. If there is no toxicology report, there is no proof of when the drugs were administered." Then came the legal assault. Ethan finally made his presence known, though not in person. His lawyer filed an emergency motion for temporary full custody of the baby. The filing claimed I was psychologically unstable due to acute grief and financially incapable of providing a secure environment. I read the words on the page. They were trying to paint me as a crazy old woman living on a pension, while Ethan was the grieving, wealthy father. "They are baiting you," Renee warned me. "They want you to scream at them in the hallway so they can record it. Do not give them the soundbite." That evening, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a post on a local Riverton community forum. An anonymous user had written a post titled "Tragedy at the Hospital Mother-in-Law Seeks Insurance Payday Over Grandson." The post detailed how I was trying to hold the baby hostage for a settlement. It was filled with lies, but the comments were already filling up with judgment. I should reply. I told Renee, my finger hovering over the screen. I should tell them the truth. "No," Renee said. "We do not fight in the mud. We wait. We will subpoena the ISP for the IP address later. We will find out who posted it. And we will add it to the lawsuit as defamation. Let them dig the hole deeper. I put the phone away. I turned to the small plastic bag of personal effects the hospital had given me. Maya's clothes, her earrings, and her purse. I dumped the contents onto the hotel bedspread. Lipstick, tissues, a wallet, and at the bottom, tucked inside a zippered pocket meant for feminine hygiene products, a small, black USB drive. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled out my laptop and plugged it in. The drive contained a single folder named Receipts. I opened it. It was not shopping receipts. It was a digital graveyard. There were photos of documents, screenshots of text messages, and one audio file labeled Voice 001. It was only 17 seconds long. I clicked play. The room went silent. If Mom hears this, Maya's voice whispered through the speakers. The sound was grainy, terrified. Don't trust the Caldwells. Don't trust Everwell. They made me. The audio cut off abruptly, followed by the sound of a door slamming and a sharp intake of breath. I sat in the dark hotel room, the silence ringing in my ears. Maya had known. She hadn't just died. She had been cornered. She had left me a breadcrumb trail, and she had hidden it in the one place she knew they would never look inside the mundane debris of a mother's life. I was not just fighting a lawsuit anymore. I was finishing a sentence my daughter had started. Renee filed the motion for an independent autopsy at 9 a.m. By 10, the Caldwell's legal team had filed an objection that was thick enough to choke a horse. They stood in the judge's chambers. Their lead attorney, a man named Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my car, feigning moral outrage. Your Honor, this is a desecration, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a somber, respectful bass. The family is grieving. Mrs. Whitaker is confused by her pain. To cut open this poor young woman again is simply unethical. Renee did not blink. The only thing unethical here is the rush to cremate a body before the toxicology results are verified against the hospital logs. The judge granted the autopsy. 2 days later, at the first evidentiary hearing, Sterling played his next card. He produced a document from his briefcase with the flourish of a magician. It was a last will and testament, dated exactly 10 days before Maya went into labor. Maya wanted to ensure her husband and child were protected. Sterling said, "This document leaves all assets, including insurance payouts and custody decisions, solely to Ethan Caldwell." I stared at the paper. The signature was there. It read, Maya Whitaker. But the loop of the Y was too tight. The slant was too vertical. "That is not her hand," I said, my voice steady. "It is a notarized document. Ms. Whitaker." The judge warned. I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 leather-bound notebooks. They were Maya's design journals, filled with sketches, typography notes, and client drafts from the last 5 years. My daughter was a graphic designer. I told the judge. She obsessively tested pens. She had a very specific way of crossing her T's. I request a handwriting analysis by a court-appointed expert. The judge looked at the journals, then at the stiff, awkward signature on the will. He nodded. Motion granted. The air in the room shifted. The Caldwells, sitting in the back row, stopped whispering. Then came the first crack in the dam. The preliminary report from the independent pathologist arrived on Renee's secure server. It did not declare murder, but it screamed incompetence. "Lorraine, look at this," Renee said, pointing to a highlighted line. The level of sedatives in her blood at the time of death was 30% higher than what was recorded in the anesthesia log. And the timing suggests the dose was administered before the consent forms were digitally stamped. It was the proof Miles Avery had promised. The Caldwells sensed the ground shifting. That evening, their tactic changed from aggression to bribery. Sterling called Renee with a settlement offer. "The family wants to end this ugliness," he told her. "They are willing to offer Mrs. Whittaker a one-time payment of $500,000 to help with her retirement. In exchange, she signs a non-disclosure agreement and waives her right to sue the hospital or the family." I sat in Renee's office, listening to the call on speaker. $500,000. It was a fortune. It was blood money. Tell them I need to see the agreement first," I said, forcing my voice to sound tired and defeated. "I need to read the terms before I sign away my rights." Renee raised an eyebrow, but she relayed the message. Within an hour, the draft agreement was in our inbox. We did not read the confidentiality clauses. Renee followed the money. "Here," she said, tapping the screen. "The settlement isn't coming from Ethan's personal account. It is coming from the Caldwell Family Trust. But look at the routing number for the wire transfer. It passes through a shell company called North Star Holdings." Renee typed furiously for a few minutes. "North Star Holdings has two primary shareholders. One is the Caldwell Trust. The other is a holding entity that owns the real estate for... Guess who Everwell Women's Pavilion?" I said. "Bingo?" Renee said. The circle was closing. They were business partners. I decided to check the other loose end. I took the slip of paper Dr. Avery had given me and searched for the administrative nurse, the one who had logged the surgery. I called the hospital switchboard, pretending to be a cousin from out of town. "I am looking for nurse Sarah Jenkins," I said. "I have a delivery for her." "Oh, I am sorry," the operator said. "Sarah is no longer with us. She resigned 2 days ago. I believe she moved to Arizona." I hung up. She had worked there for 10 years. You do not quit a job and move across the country in 48 hours unless someone is paying for the ticket or threatening to cancel it. I sat back in my chair. The anger that had been fueling me cooled into something harder, like steel tempering in oil. This was not just a family of cold-hearted socialites. This was a machine. They had people to clean the records, people to move the money, and people to silence the witnesses. "They think they are buying silence," I said to Renee. "But they just gave us the map." Tessa Monroe proved that in the modern age, a search warrant is sometimes less effective than a determined best friend with a laptop. She spent 3 nights scouring private Facebook groups and local parenting forums until she cracked the seal on a group called Riverton Moms Connect. "I found someone," Tessa told me over the phone. "Her name is Cara Dempsey. She went to Everwell 6 months ago. She wants to talk to you." We met Cara at a noisy coffee shop where the clatter of espresso machines masked our conversation. Cara was young, nervous, and holding a toddler on her lap. She pushed a folded piece of paper across the table. "When I saw the news about Maya, I felt sick," Cara whispered, her hand trembling as she smoothed the hair of her child. "They told me I was high risk. They said I needed the concierge package for safety. It cost $5,000 out of pocket. But when I actually had pains, they delayed calling the ambulance until my husband screamed at them." I looked at the invoice she had brought. It was identical to the photo on Maya's phone. Special consultation. No medical codes. No insurance processing. "There is something else," Cara said, lowering her voice. "When I was in the waiting room for my checkup, I saw a woman there. Older, expensive clothes. She wasn't a patient. She walked right into the manager's office without knocking. They were laughing. I saw her face in the obituary photos later. It was Mrs. Caldwell. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Corinne Caldwell wasn't just a concerned in-law. She was a regular at the clinic, where my daughter received the advice that killed her. Renee took this information and weaponized it. She secured a court order for the metadata logs of Maya's electronic health record. We sat in her office as the IT forensic specialist walked us through the timeline on a large screen. Here, the specialist pointed to a timestamp. At 5:42 in the morning, Maya was fully sedated. Her vitals show she was unconscious. But look at this entry at 5:43. A line of text had been modified in the chart. Patient informed of all risks and voluntarily proceeded. Who made the edit? Renee asked. The user ID belongs to a records coordinator named Jessica Tate. The specialist said. Renee did a quick background check. Jessica Tate is the niece of Corinne Caldwell's sister-in-law. She got the job 3 months ago. It was nepotism used as a cover-up tool. I needed to confirm the human element. I met Dr. Miles Avery one last time in the back row of a dimly lit cinema, a place he chose for its anonymity. He looked thinner, his eyes rimmed with red. It wasn't just negligence. He whispered, staring at the blank screen before the previews started. The charge nurse. She told the staff there were specific instructions. Keep the mother out. Do not call any other family until the procedure is done. They isolated her on purpose. Mrs. Whitaker. They wanted her alone. The Caldwells knew the walls were closing in. They switched tactics from legal threats to psychological warfare. A massive arrangement of white lilies arrived at my hotel room. The card read, "We are all hurting. Please, let's not deprive the baby of his father. Ethan has collapsed from the stress. We need to heal together." I looked at the flowers. They were beautiful, expensive, and meant to make me feel like a monster. I threw them into the trash compactor in the hallway. I was not swayed. I had separated the baby from the war. The baby needed protection. Yes, which was why Renee was filing for a neutral guardian ad litem, an independent lawyer to represent the child's interests, ensuring neither I nor the Caldwells could use him as a pawn. We are filing the civil suit tomorrow, Renee told me. Fraud, obstruction of justice, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Wait, I said. I found one more thing. I had been reviewing Maya's financial alerts, which I had finally gained access to after the bank froze the accounts. There was a notification from her life insurance provider. Look at this, I said, turning my laptop toward Renee. 3 days before Maya went into labor, her life insurance policy had been updated. The payout had been increased from $250,000 to $1 million. The premium was paid instantly from a joint account. And look at the authorization, I said, pointing to the bottom of the digital form. It was an electronic signature. It was time-stamped at a moment when I knew for a fact Maya was napping at my house, her phone in the kitchen while she slept in the guest room. He raised the value on her life, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice. Ethan raised the policy right before she went in. He didn't just let her die. Renee. He bet on it. The summons to the Human Resources Department at Harborvale Freight Systems came at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. I walked in expecting a query about the quarterly tax filings. Instead, I found the director of HR and the company's internal legal counsel sitting at a table that was completely bare except for a single manila folder. "Lorraine, take a seat," the director said, refusing to meet my eyes. "We have received a serious anonymous complaint. It alleges that you have been using your administrative access to download sensitive payroll data for personal use." I stared at them. The room was cold, air-conditioned to a temperature that felt like a morgue. "That is insane," I said. "I have worked here for 15 years. I have never taken a single paperclip." The complaint was very detailed. The lawyer interjected smoothly. "Given the severity of the allegations and the potential liability, we have to place you on unpaid administrative leave pending a full internal investigation. You need to hand over your badge and laptop immediately." I stood up, my legs feeling heavy. I understood instantly. This was not about payroll. This was a siege tactic. The Caldwells knew I was funding a lawsuit on a single salary. If they cut off the supply line, they figured the army would starve. They were trying to bankrupt me into silence. "I will give you my badge," I said, slamming it onto the table. "But you are being played." I called Renee from the parking lot while a security guard watched me to ensure I left the premises. "They suspended me," I told her, my voice tight. "They are trying to bleed me dry." "Let them try," Renee said, her voice sharp. "Where were you last Tuesday at 2 p.m? That is when the complaint says the data breach occurred." "I was in your office," I said, "signing affidavits." "Exactly," Renee said. "We are going to subpoena their server logs. If they claim you logged in from the office while you were sitting in front of me, they are lying. And Lorraine, we are going to find out where that login really came from." It took Renee 48 hours to get the logs. The Harbour Vale IT department, terrified of a wrongful termination suit, handed them over. "Lorraine, you are not going to believe this," Renee said, pointing at a highlighted row on her screen. "The login attempt using your credentials didn't come from the Harbour Vale office. It didn't even come from your home IP. It came from an IP address registered to a commercial building in Philadelphia." She tapped a few keys. "Specifically, it traces back to the guest network of Stratton and Vane, a boutique legal services firm," she said. "The same firm that handled the incorporation of the Caldwell Family Trust. They had been sloppy. They had used their own hired guns to frame me, leaving a digital fingerprint on the weapon. I was unemployed and facing a financial abyss. But I refused to hide. I did the one thing a dignified grandmother is not supposed to do. I went public. I posted on the community forum where they had tried to smear me. I announced my suspension. I announced the reason. And I opened a legal defense fund, with every penny accounted for by a third-party auditor. I am not fighting for money. I wrote, "I am fighting for the truth about how my daughter died. They took my job. Do not let them take the truth." The response was overwhelming. Donations of $10 and $20 poured in from people in Riverton who were tired of the Caldwells treating the town like their private fiefdom. The Caldwells panicked. Losing control of the narrative made them vicious. The next day, a local blog released an audio recording. It was my voice. "I want money. Surely 50,000 is not enough. For my silence." I listened to it, my stomach churning. It sounded like me, but the cadence was wrong. The pauses were unnatural. Renee hired a forensic audio expert immediately. The report came back in 3 hours. "It is a splice job," the expert said. "They took words from 3 different phone calls and stitched them together. You can hear the background noise floor change between the words money and surely. This is manufactured evidence." My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Dr. Miles Avery, They let me go. Cited a procedural error from 3 months ago. Security escorted me out. They are cleaning house. Lorraine. Everyone who saw anything is gone. I looked at the message, then at the audio analysis on Renee's desk. The Caldwells were burning the forest to kill one wolf. They had stripped me of my income, smeared my name, and fired the only witness with a conscience. They think they have won, I said to Renee. They think I am cornered. You are cornered, Renee said, looking at me with a grim smile. But that is when you are most dangerous. I stood up. I had no job to go to. I had no reputation left to lose. I had nothing but a dead daughter and a folder full of lies. File the emergency motion, I said. We are not waiting for the deposition. We are going to court. Now. The courtroom was cold, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of my anger. The hearing for the permanent guardianship and the expansion of the investigative subpoena began at 9 a.m. The Caldwells arrived like a conquering army. They had 5 lawyers. I had Renee. They looked at me, a 56-year-old grandmother suspended from her job, and they saw a nuisance they were about to crush. Sterling, their lead counsel, stood up and smoothed his tie. He projected an air of weary patience. Your Honor, Sterling said, we are presenting the last will and testament and the power of attorney once more. These documents are clear. They grant full authority to Mr. Caldwell. We are simply asking for stability for the child. This dragged-out process is harmful. The judge looked at Renee, counsel. Renee stood up. She did not look weary. She looked like a predator. Your Honor, we move to dismiss those documents as evidence, Renee said. I would like to submit the report from the independent forensic document examiner. She handed a thick file to the bailiff. The expert has concluded with a 99% certainty that the signature on the will is a forgery, Renee continued, her voice cutting through the room like a razor. The pressure points are wrong. The slant is wrong. That is not Maya Whitaker's hand. The silence that followed was heavy. I saw Corinne Caldwell stiffen in the front row. Furthermore, Renee said, not giving them time to breathe. We have the metadata logs from the hospital server. The patient record was modified at 5:43 in the morning. At that time, Maya was fully sedated. The user who made the change was Jessica Tate, a relative of the family. And here is security footage from the hallway. A screen on the wall flickered to life. It showed the corridor outside the operating theatre. It showed Corinne Caldwell walking into the restricted administrative area, unescorted. Exactly 2 minutes before the record was changed. Objection. Sterling shouted. This is circumstantial. I call Sarah Jenkins to the stand, Renee said calmly. The doors opened. Sarah Jenkins, the nurse who had supposedly moved to Arizona, walked in. She was flanked by a marshal. She looked terrified. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking violently. Ms. Jenkins, Renee asked, why did you leave the state 48 hours after Maya Whitaker died? Sarah gripped the railing of the witness stand. They told me I had to go. Who? Renee asked. The man from the Caldwell Trust, Sarah whispered, tears spilling over. He said they would pay off my student loans if I left. He said, if I stayed, I would lose my license. Ethan stood up abruptly. His face was red. This is insane. I did everything for my son. I was protecting him. I stood up. I did not ask for permission. I turned and looked directly at him. You were not protecting him, I said, my voice low and steady. My daughter died, and you turned that death into a risk management project. The judge banged his gavel, but the damage was done. The air in the room had shifted permanently. We have one final witness. Renee said, Dr. Miles Avery. Miles walked to the stand. He looked different than he had in the cinema. He looked free. He testified clearly about the medication times, the lack of consent, and the pressure from administration. Then he produced a printout. This is an internal email sent to the surgical team. Miles said, it was sent 2 hours before Maya died. The subject line is risk mitigation strategy. It instructs staff to limit family access to the patient to avoid complications with the paperwork. It was over. The whisper in the hospital hallway had become a shout in the court of law. The judge looked at the Caldwells. His expression was one of pure disgust. I am appointing a neutral guardian ad litem for the infant effective immediately. The judge ruled. Mr. Caldwell, your petition for custody is denied pending a criminal investigation. I am referring this entire file to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into insurance fraud, forgery, and medical malpractice. The Caldwell family is hereby restrained from accessing any assets or records related to the deceased. As the gavel came down, Renee checked her phone. She showed me the screen. The bank just unblocked the beneficiary change request for the investigation, she said. The request to take the $1 million didn't come from Ethan's personal IP. It was submitted through a VPN used by a shell corporation owned by Everwell. It was the final link. It wasn't just a husband's greed. It was a systemic harvest. I watched the Caldwells leave the courtroom. They were not holding champagne glasses today. They were surrounded by reporters, covering their faces, retreating into the harsh light of public scrutiny. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I just took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, my lungs filled with air that didn't taste like grief. The curtain had fallen, and everyone finally saw the monsters standing behind it. Thanks for sticking with me through this roller coaster of a story. I know it was a heavy one, but I really wanted to share it with you guys. Drop a comment down below and let me know where you're tuning in from. I love reading through your thoughts and seeing how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button for Nora Revenge Stories, smash that like button, and tap the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people.